Well, hello everybody. Welcome into Great Atmosphere. Here it's January 24th of 2024. Wanted to get started today by looking at our national radar reflectivity map, and we're currently seeing just a lot of rain. A lot of rain that's being dumped over the deep south and eastern portions of Texas. This is primarily due to that high pressure system we've talked about that's currently sitting over the Carolina coast, anticyclonically advecting warm and moist air from the Gulf up and over a colder landmass right here, and ultimately the end result of that is an overrunning effect that produces quite a bit of precipitation. Not a lot of severe weather. I know this particular reflectivity guidance shows a lot of reds. That is mainly just to show heavy rain in this particular circumstance. I think this has only issued one severe thunderstorm warning over the course of the past, at least since I've been awake today. I've only seen one in far southeastern Louisiana. The main story, though, definitely is the rain with this system. This is the past 72 hours total precipitation. These are a lot of areas down here in our Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas that have been in exceptional drought. An exceptional drought situation for quite some time, and so the ground is a little bit impervious to it. The Mississippi River has been down quite a bit, so this area will be more prone to flash flooding due to the fact that it's just a little bit harder for the ground to absorb moisture after it hasn't had to absorb any moisture over an extended period of time. And additionally, it's been quite cold in the areas, and that also subjects the soil to be a little bit more compact. So even though this is really well needed and really desirable rain for this particular region, it's quite a lot to get all at once, and 6-7 inches of rain for that particular area that hasn't seen it, generally speaking, in that amounts in a long time, can be quite dangerous. And that is why we are seeing some significant flood. And look at all these flash flood warnings that are going across eastern Texas. We all know that Houston and San Antonio, Austin are all areas that are quite susceptible to heavy flooding. So it's quite a bit of a concern today, and that flood threat will extend all the way pretty much up into the Ohio River Valley as well. Indiana and Kentucky getting some on-slope flow as well. Dense fog advisories are down. They were pretty much pretty much the entire area from Montana down to central Texas over into Illinois was covered by a dense fog advisory this morning. That is, I went into depth yesterday about why that is the case, but essentially it comes down to we have a lot of cold air directly over the surface because there's snow on the ground. And as warm air gets advected right over it, and it starts to warm and moist air gets advected right over it, right over the cold and dry air, any water that evaporates from the ground immediately will condensate right at the ground. So that's what creates a very dense fog, very dangerous driving conditions out there across the central states of the U.S. But that is slowly starting to dwindle down. We'll still see dense fog issues throughout the next couple of days, and it'll slowly make its way to the east as high, dry, continental cool air starts to build in the lee of the Rockies as we move forward into our weekend. But until then, we have flood advisories that are going to start to gradually make their way further and further east. Another big story is the temperatures, and we'll go through time here. They will gradually get more and more, or higher and higher, I'll say, as we go further on into our weekend. This is looking at Thursday. We can go a little bit further, so we get maybe our afternoon high. We'll go further still. This is the NAM 3 kilometer. So yeah, we're looking at around high 60s, around 70 for the Carolinas and the deep south. Of course, it'll be a cloudy, kind of muggy day, unfortunately, with scattered showers across the entirety of the southeast. But ultimately, a far departure from what we were experiencing this time last week when we were barely getting out of the 40s. Or barely getting out of the 30s, I should say. And I think our peak heating will probably be on Friday and Saturday here in the Carolinas, at least. That is largely indicative of just kind of sitting in that warm sector for so long. Eventually, we're just going to naturally hit those highs, and it'll also have a significant effect on what the cloud cover looks like, and that will largely be an indicator of our severe threat going in as well. If we can get some breaks in the clouds going into Friday night and into Saturday, we can start to juice up the atmosphere a little bit more with some more radiational heat. that will ultimately maybe propagate more of a severe threat as we go into the weekend. But we can take a look at kind of the guidance of temperatures that we have right here with our trusty Schref plumes. This is looking at Charlotte. I can kind of zoom out here. I don't know why it's so zoomed in. This is Charlotte, if I remember correctly. Yes. So what we look at here with these plumes is essentially as a form of telling what the confidence level is that all these ensemble members are saying what the temperature will be. So in this particular circumstance, we have a good amount of confidence that the temperatures will start to hit the mid 60s, maybe touch, the mean is not necessarily there, but there is more of a concentration. We'll get to like probably 69 degrees as we go into, I believe that is Friday. And then this is where the forecast timing kind of goes off the rails here. The models are having a really tough time deciding when the next frontal system that ultimately pushes the whole of the warm, moist air out, and it starts to begin more of a low center at the surface levels that will start to wrap around and produce a cold front that will eventually push everything out to sea. Some models are saying that it's going to start as early Friday morning. Some models are saying that it's going to be mid Saturday night when that might happen. Ultimately, we just have to keep paying attention, and that will ultimately dictate our severe threat as we move forward, because if it happens more at night or we get more of a cloud deck, we wouldn't expect to see, or it happens a little bit earlier in the period, we wouldn't expect to see as much of a severe threat as we would if it were further, if it were later in the period, and we get some sunshine mixed in there as well. So moving right along, we're actually just going to be we're not going to be looking so much at our extended forecast. We've taken a look at that ad nauseum already this week, but we'll get back to that as we approach Friday, more than likely. Taking a look at our severe threat as pertaining to the SPC's convective outlook. It has a mark. Actually, we'll look at today's. I believe they actually just reduced this. They originally had a level 2 slight going into southern Louisiana. They have taken that away, but we still see those tornado probabilities there as well. That is largely due to an increased level of bulk shear and cape that our mixed layer cape, I should say. In addition to that, a pronounced hail threat actually in the southern tier of Texas. That's mainly due to the fact that the shear vectors are largely going in the same direction. It's mainly a speed shear issue that's going over that particular region of Texas. So lots of convection, and ultimately that is the only area, and these areas over here we have wind kind of diverging in two different directions, but it's over the same here, and there is quite a bit of buoyancy that's available in that particular region as well. So taking a look at what we're going to be seeing over the next few days on a synoptic national scale level. So we have our our high pressure that's sitting off of the coast that is advecting all of this air. Sorry, I got to go back. All of this air, warm, moist air from the Gulf. And then as we move forward in time, this is on Friday, still the same general pattern we see right there. All right, see in Texas, or in the panhandle, it's a panhandle low that is forecast. This is the ensemble for the GFS, so this is what their general model agreement is saying. This panhandle low will form, and it'll ultimately be the catalyst or the impetus for getting this general pattern out to sea in a more full fashion. So we're saying it's expecting for this low to start to dip down a little bit here, start to deepen, and then we start to develop our full warm front, cold front scenario here as it shifts and jettisons off to the northeast. Cold front starts to move forward, and now that is where the timing and severe threat will ultimately be our main indicator, because if we see what the ensembles are saying here, this is at 500 millibars and Saturday night. So this is about where we would be in the upper levels at this point. So we can see that this is a generally positively tilted trough that is generally indicative of a less of a severe threat, just because there isn't that jet max that is going to be primarily centered on the axis of the trough axis. That is ultimately our main indicator of the strength of the storm itself. But we do have it is tightening up quite a bit according to latest guidance. And it'll be interesting to see if this starts to tilt a little bit more as you move forward in time, to see if there would be more of a severe threat in that particular circumstance. But we'll continue to monitor it. It starts to become even more positively tilted as it comes out to sea, which kind of makes me think that it's not going to be that pronounced. It's going to be more of a highly convective rain event as we go into the weekend. But that's just what the ensembles are currently predicting. And then behind it, we have these broad height rises that are going to be making its way. It'll start moving itself out, and you can see as we move forward through the week that there's a general speaking high pressure ridge that starts building in here, which will ultimately contribute to a good amount of very nice weather as you move forward into the week next week. And as we go forward actually into the week, you can see just this is going into next weekend. It should be quite nice. Probably cooler temperatures than we experienced this week, but still nice and dry for the majority of the eastern seaboard. So that's a good thing to look forward to. And it's kind of indicative of the pattern that we're in, this kind of like 10 days on, 10 days off, 10 days of unstable weather, 10 days of stable weather. And then depending on the state of the polar vortex and whether or not it's trapping all that Arctic air up in the Arctic reaches, ultimately that is indicative of what kind of weather we experience here in January. So now that the cold air is all the way up in the polar vortex, as we discussed earlier in the week, or is slowly making its way to being that way, we would expect this to be more of a nice, mild, dry event as we go forward into next week. But we got to get there first, and until then, it's going to be quite unsettled. We'll take a look at some of the severe parameters and kind of like what we're looking at in that sense going forward. So this is looking at Thursday. This is mixed layer cape, so we're kind of measuring the buoyancy, how easy it is for the atmosphere to lift a parcel of moist air up into the atmosphere and ultimately create convection necessary in order for severe storms to occur. As we go forward in time, this is looking at Thursday, Friday. We can see actually by what the SPC is predicting for Thursday and Friday, if we go forward here, that most of Mississippi, Alabama, and the southern tier of Louisiana is under the gun for at least a marginal look. And then this is the day 3. They've actually removed the marginal that had existed here and just say a general thunderstorm threat, which I think is mainly indicative of that positively tilted trough flow that we experienced there on the 500 millibar map earlier. And then we look at the day 4 outlook. Now this is a little bit concerning for day 4 just because they don't typically put out a day 4 guidance unless there's a good reason to. And on day 4 they do have a 15% severe risk area over Alabama and Georgia, particularly the southwestern portions of the Atlanta metroplex. So that'll be a little bit of a concern to watch out for, and we can kind of take a look at probably what they're looking at by looking at some of these maps. So that's day 4, so that's looking at 4 days from now, so Saturday. And we can look at Saturday. We might not be able to see it here on the NAM. We can start to see it a little bit as it starts to form in. We see the atmosphere kind of goes through like refresher stages, so that's our threat on Friday. This would be, Thursday. You see those grays and blues. That's kind of, it shows that there's an environment there conducive for sun development if other parameters are in place, but it's a generally low cape, high shear scenario, which is a moderate severe threat. We would experience a generally a disorganized QLCS squall line from that particular type of setup, which is kind of what the reflectivity models are showing. And then even lesser cape as we go forward in time over the Carolinas, but the NAM has not fully resolved that as of yet. But generally speaking, just looking at the current guidance right there, it doesn't look too promising. We can look at some other parameters as well. We can perhaps, we'll look at bulk shear. As I said, it would be a high shear, low cape event, which is generally speaking a conducive setup for some form of severe weather. Usually quick tornadic spin-ups and a severe wind threat for the most part along that squall. So that's what we're going to be looking at for the next couple of days. As we go forward in time, we'll look at Saturday. You can see the shear definitely accelerates as it goes forward, but ultimately the cape starts to taper off. And Saturday, let's see, they have a good amount of the bulk shear coming in. I expect this to be where it expects the front to occur. So the NAM is actually quite slow, which isn't the best sign as far as predicting a severe event. So let's see what the bulk shear is looking like for the NAM as we go forward. Okay, interesting. So it definitely has that surface low start to form. you can see, and we can maybe look at what the NAM is predicting on a larger scale here, because if it's more of a positively, or if it's more of a neutrally tilted trough, we would definitely start to have to look at this a little bit harder. Yeah, that's certainly much more neutrally tilted, and it's much more delayed. So slightly concerning. I mean, it still has a general positively tilt, but it's got more of a short wave that forms right in this area. Actually, I gotta go back. The pivotals say so. If we go all the way out to the end of its guidance, which is not the most reliable thing to do by any means, but it's what we're given with. So we have a little bit of a pseudo short wave that forms right here. The general trough is still positively tilted like this, but this little indentation right there is going to start maximizing this area of the jet streak, and that if the flow starts to go more meridional, that could be an indicator that we're going to get a little bit more of a stronger QLCS event and more of a straight line wind event as well. Going into midday Saturday. So that's what the NAM is currently saying. It's definitely worth keeping an eye on. The main limiter, I think, for this is going to be the lapse rates. So this is kind of the difference in temperature and moisture that the atmosphere experiences with height. So if it's like really severe, like it's really cold and dry at the top of the atmosphere directly over you, but it's like really warm and moist at the bottom where you're currently at the surface. Those would simulate very high lapse rates, but in this case, it's not Arctic air that's behind the majority of the system. It's mainly just cooler, more continental air mass that is drier than what we've experienced here in this week, and that's not going to be a main. If we were to be like way up, if it were summertime, and we go from like 90 degrees to a 70-degree drop, well, that's a lot more of a mean energy drop than a 60-degree to a 40-degree drop. You know, it kind of has an exponential curve in terms of severity when it comes to that level of temperature, and that has to do with seasons. So if we were to see this kind of setup in the summer, I would expect there to be a much more pronounced severe threat, or not even summer, more of a late spring. But in this case, we're in the dead of winter. It's still mid-January. Cold fronts. It's still going to be cold no matter on which side that you're going to get it on. It's just more of a relativity thing. So in this case, lapse rates are pretty well ambiguous and not that severe. Now this particular run of the NAM has it way out here. Once it gets to that 7.4 degrees Celsius per kilometer, that's usually kind of the threshold for like, okay, there's definitely something thunderstormy there. But overall, this does not look like a good environment for any kind of discrete supercells, which is a good thing as we go forward. So generally, I just wanted to get a general understanding from what the environment is currently, or the models are currently putting out. That is all I really had scheduled to talk about today. Just wanted to kind of touch on the mesoscale severe threat that might be making our way. And ultimately kind of just reinforcing that rain threat. The rain threat is definitely going to be the main player as we go forward in time. We can maybe see some of that rain and how much we're expecting here in Charlotte. Charlotte's looking at a mean inch, but this is all very indicative that it's going to be more of a scattered shower setup. We can go forward. Maybe we can go to the Atlanta Metroplex. A little bit of a higher mean. We're at an inch and a half there. But then if we go straight into the deep south where we have that conveyor belt, that's where we get 3 inches or more. So definitely the storm will start to peter out, and it won't produce as much precipitation as we go throughout the rest of the week. It'll be much more of a scattered event, and then we'll have to look at Saturday. Hopefully not Saturday late afternoon, but NAM currently wants to show that for a potential severe threat here in the Carolinas and into Georgia. I wouldn't expect this to go all the way into central Virginia, but that is currently just the nature of things that we're looking at right now. Once again, folks, my name is Zach for Great Atmosphere. I appreciate you tuning in today. I will be back tomorrow with another southeast-oriented weather forecasting video. I would appreciate your subscription, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.